All right, guys, we are gonna paint this today. We're doing the sunset. We have one of my favorite people in the whole world, a student of mine. She took this picture when she was visiting a friend's house on the lake, and there was this gorgeous sunset. So what was very interesting, though, we have done sunset and silhouette paintings before, but it's been a while. So we had to really think about this for a second. Now we're gonna start with this painting with a very loose wet and wet style of a background. So let's get rolling on that. I am going to be using a large flat for this. And remember too, this is a 9x12 paper, by the way, 100% cotton watercolor block cold press paper is on sale at Dick Blick right now. I think it's 40% off. So this was just under $23 for the 20 sheets, which is a good deal. Certainly less expensive than Arches. My brush is a little bit dirty and I don't want that, so I'm just gonna change my water and my brush real quick. And then I do want to kind of check here. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of keep things centered. This is not a super detail-oriented painting, you know, it's much more, I'm gonna do mine in a very loose style. So that's what I'm working on. I'm gonna do a loose interpretation of this. I'm not gonna get real fussy about all of the details, and I'm going to be using this as inspiration, and mine probably won't look exactly like that picture, and that is okay. So since this is on a block, I'm not taping down my edges. We'll see how well this block performs. Some are better than others. And it's been a minute since I bought Dick Blick paper. But I'm going ahead and wetting my paper thoroughly, making sure I really get it in there, you know, trying to get any of the dog hair or brush hair that I'm putting onto the paper out of there. All right, now I'm going to start mixing up some colors. And I'm going to be using Pyrrole Scarlet, which is my warm red, as well as my new Gamboge, which is my warm yellow, and then I will also add in some of this ultramarine as well, but I'm going to do that on the page. So I'm going to start. Even though I know that I'm gonna have this tree line, even though I know I'm gonna have this tree line in front of this, one of the things I really love is this very yellow spot here. So I think I'm gonna extend that a little bit. Yeah, so all I need to do right now is kind of decide where my horizon line, all of this is dark, 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 so we are going to be able to put those values on top of our first wash. So let's get started getting, I'm gonna put our horizon line somewhere around here. And with this wet paper, I am going to just start adding paint and letting it bloom. And I want this to be the most intense area of this yellow, and I'm not gonna be afraid about that. And then I have the Pyrrole Scarlet, and I'm gonna start dropping this in, letting it blend on the page some. Okay, and I'm also gonna take the same thing down here. Then I'm gonna start bringing in my my French ultramarine, because I want to get kind of a purpley color for up here. Now you can, you know, do this in the cool colors as well, and it would be just as pretty. I was just feeling these warmer colors, but with these warmer colors, I do feel like I'm not gonna get the pink in here as well, but I'm okay with that. You know, you do what you wanna do. You can absolutely mix your own colors. I'm gonna dip into some of my kind of more pure Pyrrole Scarlet here. And back into some of my gamboge where I can kind of see some of this little bit of sun that's in the water. And at this point, I'm pretty much done with my reference photo, right? I don't really need it anymore. All right, so that's pretty much my background. Now I gotta let it dry. All right, for our actual painting, now this is dry. I did dry it with a hair dryer, so that does leave me at more risk for blooms. I'm okay with that. It's in the background, and we're gonna have trees and other things, and it looks kind of cool, so I'm not too worried about it. But if you want to avoid blooms and you're working wet on wet, you should really let it dry naturally. I'm just in a bit of a hurry right now, so I didn't. So let's look at, we have this tree shape here, and it's one big shape, and that kind of goes like here-ish. Now you don't have to draw anything. You could do this all on your, you know, just on your, based on your imagination. And then we have this other tree stand that kind of comes up here like this. So that's kind of the two bases of my tree stands. And then here I have kind of the earth that comes out to this little peak, and then it comes down and back. Now, if you are going to be framing to 8 by 10, make sure that whatever you're putting down, you can see when it's framed, right? You don't want like details in the corner that you're not going to be able to see. And you can, of course, trace this dock stuff if you want to, but it's basically just a line that has, you know, a space kind of like this. And it goes out here. All right, and I can get more precise with this in a little bit. Actually, this is a little bit shorter. And do you guys see what I'm doing? I'm drawing and erasing on watercolor paper that already has paint on it, but it is dry. So once your watercolor paper is dry, if you've got some stray marks, you can absolutely go back in and use your eraser. I mean, you want to be gentle with it, but yeah, you can do that. And then we're gonna have, you know, some of these pylon things, or, you know, whatever they are. You know, those things that you tie your boat to. Have those there. We've got like something tall coming up here. So those are just details. I want to put them in so I don't lose them. In class, I opted against putting in these trees over on the side, but I will put them in for this. So I just know that I want like maybe branch kind of here-ish. It should go kind of like this, up into the corner. And again, let me just see how much of this I'm gonna see. Yeah, that's cool. And then I can have my trunks going like here. something like this. And it doesn't have to be precise at this point. I just kind of want to know where I'm going to be working. Okay, so now that I'm sketched out, let's mix up some paint. Now this is a super dark, but I want to go ahead and use the 3 colors that I've already been using, mix those together, and do a dark or, never mind, skip that. Okay, so now I want to start mixing up some paint, and we could absolutely use the 3 colors that we've been using and mix up our very, very dark by combining all of those, but I'm going to take advantage of some of my convenience colors, and I'm going to use olive green with my deoxygenate purple and combine those to make these darks in the background here. I am also switching brushes to something smaller than my large flat. That just wouldn't work out here. So let's see. I think for my trees and whatnot, I'm going to use a number 14. This is not a round, not a flat, it's a filbert, and I haven't used it in a while, so let's give it a go. I do have my paints activated, and that just means I spritz them. And then I'm going to be adding the green. And the purple, and my purple is very strong, so I actually use a little bit more green than purple, and I can also go back in with those 2 colors as I need them. So what I want to do now that I am all mixed up and ready to go, let me clean off my brush here quickly. I want to put my water where I want my trees to go and a little bit beyond, right? So I know that I want this tree line kind of here. And yes, my brush is a little bit dirty. I didn't wash my brush all that well, whatever. So I'm gonna start putting in this blob here with just some plain water, right? And then I'm gonna do the same here. And I'm gonna make sure and leave plenty of space in this canopy with no water so that I can see through some of this. So this is just with the water. And now I can start with my dark. And these are, it looks like it's mostly deciduous trees. There is a mix with some pine trees. So like this is a pine tree, this is a deciduous tree, probably an oak or something. And it looks like a winter scene. So we're seeing quite a bit of light through here. But we are still seeing some fullness because it looks like there are pine trees back there too, which of course don't lose their leaves. So I am going to start kind of going up here like this, and I've got a very wet paper where I'm at. And then I'm going to also take this and let it start flowing upwards. And I can start flicking upwards as well and just letting the paint do its thing. And because I've only wet a certain area, when I go outside of that area, I'm not necessarily going to be getting these same bloom effects. I'll get crisp edges, which is nice, right? And if there are spots where, okay, well, maybe that's a little bit too much, or in my case, I've got a spot where even though I'm on a watercolor block, my paper is kind of buckling there. So I'm really just hinting at trees. These are distant trees, I'm hinting at them, and I definitely want to see some of this color coming through. And then on this side, I know that this is where I want it to start. I want my trees to start. So I'm gonna put in that line there. I'm gonna kind of, there we go. Then I can start flicking up the trunks. And then I'm just going to tap in some of this color here. You could also do the flicking. Y'all know I like that. It's very fun. I could have covered all of that up. That probably would have been smart, but I'm going to show you that if I'm not quite moving as much as I want, I can go ahead and spritz. And because I still have my background brush here, that's not the one I was using. I was like, why is that so stiff? I was just using it. But I can just go ahead and feather those drips in that I don't want. And no one will know, it's fine. And I have introduced a little water to this side here, so I can kind of feather this up and out even more. I'm really letting my paint do my work for me here. The paint and the water, of course. And here again, this block is kind of really buckling at certain spots. So I am having to tap out some things that are puddling. But that's okay, this is only our first wash here. So I'm gonna just kind of leave that for a second. And then I'll come back to it in a minute. I'm going to add a little bit more green to a portion of my dark mix here. And I'm gonna block in a little bit of water here, this earth part down here. Okay. And because when we come forward, our colors should get warmer, I am gonna put a little bit of quinacridone gold just right into this wet paint here. And I think it's gonna give it a really pretty warm glow and make it look really earthy, which is kind of what we want here. And then I'm gonna go right into my tree branches. With my tree branches, I could use the same exact dark that I have, but I am actually gonna put just a little bit of sepia in with that color, just to make it a little bit more browny. Okay. Okay, so now I'm gonna start painting my tree trunks here. I'm sticking with this filbert, and I do have some wetness going on in some areas still. So I'm not gonna make my branch or my tree quite as big in some areas as it should be, because I'm probably gonna need to go back in and clean it up because I'm working a little bit wet and wet there. But we'll see how it goes. That's the thing, watercolor is a little bit unpredictable when you're working wet, but that's also what makes it so incredibly beautiful. Okay, and then this one is kind of coming off the page and up. Okay, and I actually really love the quinacridone gold in there, and the earth part. So I am going to put a little bit in my trees too, just to kind of make them glowy. You know, everything is glowing here. We don't know which way the light is bouncing because it's bouncing off the water, it's bouncing, you know, from the sky. It's just reflecting everywhere. Now, when you're doing this, I am using pretty thick paint to go over this. But then I can go back. Okay, maybe I lost too much of that dark. So I can come back here and redefine some of that dark. So you just have to kind of look at it and play with it a little bit, but you don't want your trees to be a totally uniform color either, because then you lose all sense of depth. And we're not trying to create a flat graphic here. We're doing painterly kinds of things. And then this actually goes all the way, like way up here. Like this, kind of almost off the page. And then we're gonna have some branches that come out. And I could absolutely switch to a rigger. It's probably more comfortable to do it like that, but I am gonna get some blooms, and I'm intentionally doing this right here, right now, because I want some of my lines to be more solid than others, because I'm going to be putting this tree's foliage on top of all of this as well. Okay, so sticking with the dark mix, but again, adding more of the green. I'm gonna come in and let's see, it looks like this one here is actually the pine tree. So I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna just start tapping in kind of this pine shape. And some of this is in my imagination, some of this I'm seeing, because it, you know, I'm trying to kind of untangle what trees are where and what's going on. But I'm seeing this kind of a piney shape happening. And I'm kind of varying the colors of my greens, right? Some is more purple, some is more truly green. And the reason for that, again, is the depth. So as we're painting, we're creating the depth. And with a very simple process too, we're not reinventing anything here. We're going straight on, just tapping, which is a very, very useful and effective painting technique. That the ability to tap in images like this, yes, you need that. And I kind of, now that that tree is there, I wish my trunk was slightly different. So I'm gonna do partially something about that. So I'm going back into my sepia here, and I am going to make a nice large branch. Okay, that works for me. It just looked like It was falling off. Okay, and then back to the greens. I have, you know, it looks like some, you know, deciduous or regular kind of tree leaf action happening up in this area. And I'm not going to get precious about this too much because there's not a whole lot of it. And I may go ahead and just do a teensy bits of spritzing back here because I want it to kind of fall into the background more. Like maybe the pine tree is in front of this other tree. This is quite wet up here, so I'm going to take some of this. I can always come back in and add more. And that's the one of the beautiful things about watercolor is you can always come back in and add more, but starting kind of slower is important. Trying to keep some space for that light to come in beyond the tree. Okay, great. Now, my background is quite a bit lighter than this picture, and I don't hate it. I really like it, actually. So I'm gonna have to think about that and what I want to do there. Okay, I have stood up, I've walked around, I've come back, and I've made a decision that I want this painting to be more about this because I'm loving how that background turned out and the reflection in the water. And so I am going to take out my dock, and I'm not going to do it on this one. I did it in class, but I didn't put these in. I don't know, for some reason, I just kept feeling like the painting was too cluttered in class with both the items. So I have erased that, and we'll just kind of go from here and concentrate on the reflections in the water, because I think that's really the most interesting part about our inspiration anyway. The one thing that I do want to do before I start putting in my shading is I want to make sure that I am reserving a little piece of the light right there, right? So I'm going to start putting my shadows in right here, and I am going to be using the same dark that I have been using, and I dropped it into some water there. I'm okay with it there. This is going to kind of come down here. This may be part of a shadow already, so we'll just kind of join these up like this. I have this tree shadow here, but then in my reference, there's this beautiful spot where, you know, it's just kind of looking ripply, water ripply, and so I'm gonna make that happen just with clean water and pulling just a little bit of that shadow. So I'm softening the edge, I'm making it kind of wavy. This part was dry before, so it takes a little bit of effort to soften that. I want to kind of soften that, put in those marks, dry my brush off, maybe come back, put in a couple of more marks so that, you know, my shadow isn't quite so dark. And we're going to be flicking back up here and making more depth in these trees a little bit, so I'm not too terribly worried if this isn't quite perfect yet. Okay, so I like that. This, I think, shadow needs to come forward just a little bit more like this, but then getting lighter here with just the little bit of ripples. And I barely have anything on my brush, and remember, watercolor does dry lighter, so even if it feels like it's too much, it's probably not. So I'm gonna keep kind of just barely with anything on my brush, and I can even pick up some orange here too, that I have on my palette right next to it, and start just putting in these little crisscrossy water shapes. And then all the way up here, like here-ish, we get this shadow from this tree line in the back. So I'm putting in just some clean water, and then I'm gonna drop in almost just pure purple. It is mixed a slight amount, but almost just pure purple. And then I'm gonna drop in some water. I want this to be blooming. And I'm doing this on purpose. I know that when this dries, I'm going to get blooms, but that's gonna look really cool as a shadow, so that's why I'm doing it. So it is intentional, and that's the thing. When we start really working with wet and wet techniques, you can use the things that can be mistakes in some paintings to your advantage and create beautiful effects with them. We are doing a wild and loose workshop tomorrow where I am teaching all loose techniques for watercolor, and I'm so excited. It's going to be so much fun, and it's a nice small class, so we can really, you know, focus and concentrate. So I really like that. I do want to bring some of these tree shadows down as well. So I'm gonna kind of take from where I'm at here and bring some of these kind of tree-like shapes down just with clean water, and then I can drop in some pigment. I don't want too much. And we want, remember, the water goes side to side, so I can use what I've just put to kind of make a wavy shadow impression. And there is a little bit more green in this part of the shadow. Kind of just want to bring this shadow out so that we can see that this is separate, you know, from that. Another way that you can think of when you're painting water is to kind of, you know, you're crisscrossing, but you make like little Ys, right? So if you make Ys, you get water shapes, or dashes. And I really like how that's looking, but I want to help it along with just a little spritz because it's a little bit too tight. There we go. And maybe that's just a little bit too far out. Okay, and I'm getting a little bit of a puddle here, so I'm just gonna pick that up some and then just drop a little bit more of this in. Okay, I've just dried my brush and I just want to pick up right here, making sure that I keep that area a little bit lighter so we can tell where our landmass is. Okay, nice. Now I have to let this part dry, but at the same time, I want to come back into this pine and really just pick up pure purple and create some more of the shadow kind of just on the underneath side of these boughs. Really give it some more depth. Can also take this purple and, you know, create a little bit more drama in some of your branches. You probably don't want to do all of them, but in some. These are great brushes for pine trees too, because when you've got it kind of on its side, its tip like this, it makes really pretty kind of feathery, I guess, shapes. And remember, because watercolor is a translucent medium, the more layers you put on, the more opaque your paint becomes, right? And also, there's, you know, kind of a saying in watercolor, when in doubt, value it out, you know. It means if you can't figure out how to fix it, go ahead and make it darker. And that's about all you can do sometimes. And that's why I'm not a watercolor snob, and I do mixed media things as well, because sometimes you have to fix something that you can't fix with just plain watercolor. It's just too translucent. So I'm just adding some more dark, just barely, but a little bit more dark to my trunks, and kind of setting these trees in the ground here a little bit more. And I think it would be nice to go ahead and do some grasses up here. And for that, I am gonna switch to my rig brush. Okay, so at this point, I went ahead and dried what I had here, and I could really be done. I could add a few, you know, grasses and whatnot in watercolor here. But I did want to show, this is one of the things that I use with watercolor sometimes, and it's India ink. It's waterproof. That means that it's a permanent ink. It's not gonna go anywhere. If I can get it open, I'll show you how that goes. So I generally use a brush with India ink, and I just have a scrap piece of paper here. And it's quite thin, and it goes on really beautifully, and you can create, you know, lovely lines and things like that. Now you could use this with like a calligraphy pen or something like that if you wanted to, but I want to embrace the silhouette thing that we've got going on here, but really intensify it. And I think that this kind of lends kind of a modern look to paintings like this too. So first off, I'm going to define my horizon back here some more, not with a solid line necessarily, but you know, this really is getting to the detail aspect. Then I'm going to put in, you know, some scrubby trees up here. You know, not the ones in the distance, but these ones up here. These ones that are real close, or they're getting closer. So I'll have some with thicker and some with thinner. But I don't have to do the foliage in this too. I can leave that for another wash. And I think that's what I'm gonna do. I am gonna put in maybe some little scrubby stuff down here though. You know, that kind of underbrush thing. So already that area has a lot more depth and drama. And then I'm going to take the same concept here on these trees, but I'm going to be a little bit more deliberate. You know, basically I'm painting the things that are going to be closest to us. And I'm just using my imagination on these trees. I'm not, you know, painting a specific tree or anything like that. And I'm not going to put in a ton here, and some are going to be really just a trunk. Really want to vary the size so that I create this illusion that there's a lot of depth here, right? Like you're, you know, I'm actually feeling like I'm pretty far away from my inspiration picture at this point, but that's okay, because that's what happens with paintings. Sometimes they take you in a different direction than what you intended, and I just recommend that you go with it. Like if it's taking you in a direction that's unexpected, that's where the magic happens. That's where it's really, really interesting and fun. And that's, you know, I don't want to, you know, talk about spirituality too much, but I do think that there is someone leading us sometimes, and I don't know who you believe in, and I'm not sure that I know the creator's name even, if that makes sense, but I do know that I feel compelled to do things that I had no intention of doing in my artwork a lot. And so I'm just taking this ink again, and I'm making a big mess. I'm going to have a lot of grass over here to get rid of that ink blob, because this is permanent. Once it's on there, it's on there. This is not like watercolor where you can kind of scoop it off or whatever, and you're not going over it either. So once it's on there, it's on there. If you drop a big blob of it on your paper, you just have to deal with it. And don't be like me and overload your brush with the ink. You know, that's obviously creating problems for me, and yet I persist in this ridiculousness. So don't be like me. You know, don't overload your brush with the ink. Take your time. I think I want to add a real dark line back here as well. Kind of maybe into here. See, I almost did it again. I do tend to learn things the hard way, and it usually takes me more than one time to learn. I can also, if I want, just, you know, do some slight things to this very, very front bit here, you know, to strengthen that in just a couple of spots. To really emphasize this silhouette nature. This is just adding a ton of drama, you know, that would take so much time and layering to get a black this black with watercolor. It's nearly impossible. So, you know, don't dismiss right away using other mediums with your watercolor. I know that, you know, some old fuddy-duddies like have very specific rules about what's traditional watercolor, what's the blah 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 blah. I do what I want. And if I have these tools in my toolbox and it makes the art better, why wouldn't I? Like, who cares? Anyway, that's just me on my soapbox again. All right, and maybe just kind of edging in just a tiny bit of super dark detail here. God, now Britney Spears is in my head. Upside down. Oh. Boy. Okay, I think that's about it for that. I'm gonna give this a quick dry, make sure my ink is dry, and then I'm gonna come back in and just redefine some of this tree line back here. Okay. Okay, I am going to just redefine that tree line in the back a little bit, and I'm gonna do really almost a straight purple, but it does have a little green. It's right next to each other here, mixing, and I'm gonna just tap it in. Yeah, a little bit more green, I think. I'm kind of just switching back and forth between the purple and the green as I'm grabbing paint here. A little bit more of this green on top. Almost like the green is the shadow part in this background. Okay. And I kind of just want to define this slightly. So I just have a little bit of really watery purple right here. I just want to kind of drop in that other layer, a little bit of green in there to shade. One more little layer there. And now that I've started that one more little layer, I have to make it, you know, kind of look cohesive. So, and I don't have the shakes, but this is kind of my technique for trees is to, you know, drink a bunch of coffee and then sit there, you know, and just shake, shake, shake. Oh gosh, Britney Spears, now Taylor Swift. Ugh, what's happening to my brain? Okay. So I'm really happy with this, and I'm going to call it quits, and I hope you enjoyed this, and give this a try with or without the dock, with or without the trees, but the reflections and keeping that light value kind of coming through, I think that's what makes the piece. Plus, I really love the drama of using the India ink for the darkest of the darks. Gives it a fresh look, maybe a little bit more of a modern look to this. So give it a try, and I can't wait to see your finished paintings.